Alrighty, everyone. So we should be live for our third live stream of the week. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a quick second to get in here. But first off, welcome you all by saying welcome to the update for today. Today is March 18th of 2020. And in today's video, we've got a lot of important news to talk about, guys. It seems like things are still continuing to develop across the world, not only in cryptocurrency markets, but in traditional markets, as we're continuing to see a global growth in the cases of confirmed coronavirus cases across the globe, not just here in the United States, but across a variety of other Western countries, as we've started to see control become the standard across a lot of countries like Singapore, Japan, and South Korea, which were kind of the first candidates outside of China to face the COVID-19 or coronavirus. So we're going to be talking not only about the current responses right now, how markets are reacting, and a little bit of foresight into what we should be expecting over the next coming days, but just kind of get a whole summary of what's been going on. There's a lot of developments that are important to break down, and some of the response tactics that the U.S. is taking on in the sense of not only structural policy to reduce cases, but also fiscal policy. So we got a lot of things to discuss, guys, but real quick, just to let you all know, this video is sponsored by Ledn.io. Now, for those of you who don't know about Ledn.io, Ledn is a platform that allows you to put your Bitcoin to work, and there's three different main services that they offer. They offer their saving program, where you can start earning Bitcoin interest off of your Bitcoin savings, and along with that as well, they've got a borrowing program where you can actually use your Bitcoin to get dollar-backed loans, or stablecoin loans in this case, on your Bitcoin holdings. And outside of that as well, they have their B2X program, which gives you increased exposure to Bitcoin by simply depositing your Bitcoin and submitting for the program. So you can double your holdings and double your potential returns. So lots of interesting things here on Ledn. If you guys are interested, there's a $250,000 Satoshi sign up bonus if you register today. So that'll be linked down below in the description. But anyways, guys, let's go ahead and dive into the video here. I want to go ahead here and take a look at the last 24 hours here. Vast majority of cryptocurrency markets in a relatively no trend scenario, more pointing down in the red at the moment. But again, nothing too severe. Again, I think we're just simply pushing sideways here. The one development that I want to share before we dive really into the main topic here, which is COVID-19, is just taking a look here at crypto markets. There's two things I want to focus on: Bitcoin and Bitcoin dominance. In the case of Bitcoin here, all in all, we're taking a look at the hourly chart. I want to see this start to set and continue to set higher lows here. We've already set a significant higher low here from where we set the bottom here back a couple of days ago during the absolute panic sell back on the 12th. In this case, what we're looking for is at least at a minimum a third higher low, and I would really like to see us start setting up higher lows off of this trend line, right? I want to start seeing that buyers are getting more eager and buying at these levels, and that we're getting a faster recovery than what we've gotten previously, as we've been generally pushing sideways here around 5,000. So that's what I'm looking for in the sense of Bitcoin. For Bitcoin dominance, again, you're not going to get much info on the hourly here. I would say to just watch the daily here and see whether or not we start to really tick up higher here. And quite frankly, we're not seeing much right now, right? Things are just pushing sideways, roughly speaking. Take a look at the weekly, the trend, relatively inconsistent here, just pushing sideways. So we'll have to see if altcoins continue to gain here, if we set a lower high here in this case for altcoin markets. But again, time will tell here. So not much is shifting in the sense of crypto markets, but boy, do we have a lot going on in the sense of global markets. Now, first off, I want to say thank you guys for joining the stream here. We've got a lot of important things to dive into today in regards to COVID-19 and just kind of digesting all of it in a non-biased way, not getting too panicky about it, but also asking whether or not we're responding fast enough. One of the key things that's important to take into mind is we just hit over 200,000 cases globally. And the significance of this is it showcases, as we'll take a look at some graphs here in just a moment, that across the globe right now, a lot of countries are at a turning point. They're going to have to make the decision as to how they're going to go about approaching this. And we've heard a few different ways about approaching COVID-19 from different governments. You have some that are taking probably one of three different options. The worst of them probably being in this case something that has been proposed by the UK and a few other areas, and that's basically herd immunity. And it's the idea that we should get enough people sick in this case so that as they go through getting sick, hopefully younger people in this case who are less at risk to actually have long-term health ramifications. The idea is to get enough young people sick in this case, whereas you have a herd immunity so that you stop spreading it in this case, and it's less risky so that after you get it once, right, you're not going to be at risk for spreading it again in this case. That has been something that some countries have proposed. I'm personally not a fan of it. A lot of the World Health Organization and most of the major bodies that are actually trying to combat this virus are not speaking for that. They're actually speaking for the third option, which I'll mention. The second one here would probably be doing a very temporary closures, right? And this has basically been what we've been seeing right now in the United States and in Canada, as we'll take a look at in just a moment. And then the third one here in this case is a mass quarantine. Now, again, I'm usually a very big libertarian. I'm a big skeptic of something like a lot of people have been calling the idea of and the concept of martial law and all kinds of stuff like that. I do believe during times of crisis like this where something can grow exponential. I mean, you guys know on the channel here, I like to look at things 5 to 10 months out, right? I like to think about things long term. What is this going to be like if we don't combat this now? So I think it's really going to call on a nation, not just in the United States. It's going to call us. It's going to call on all of us across a variety of countries and different backgrounds to come together and combat this early and fix it sooner rather than later. And the only way we can do that is through boosting testing, boosting social distancing, boosting cleanliness, and then also, most importantly, probably coming through a mass quarantine in this case where we just simply stay indoors for a couple of days, unless basically we're part of what would be seen as essential employees, right? If you're not essential, you don't need to be out there in the workforce right now. Just stay inside right now or work remote, right? That's the key point here, guys. And I know a lot of you guys are putting questions in the chat. We'll dive into it in just a moment. But I want to go ahead here now that we're talking about the cases reaching over 200,000. Global markets almost rolling over most of the gains they got yesterday. Again, I know we had a smash hit day yesterday. Markets were confident with the response, again, that we've had here in the United States and probably a lot of world governments across the world. But it still does not seem to be enough. We can see here NASDAQ trading down 4.4%. We see the Dow Jones down 4%, the S&P 500 down 3.71%. And that's not the only story here, guys. Indices across the world, the SMI in Switzerland, the Nifty in India, and also here the MSCI in Taiwan, all trading down lower. With Russia, again, bearing the worst here as it's been going through a price war with Saudi Arabia in the sense of oil production. Now, again, we've hit this big figure of 200,000 cases here. What are some things that we should keep in mind here in order to gain some substance? Well, we can see here on the chart here, this is a really good chart showcasing us what we can be like, right? What we can do here and how we can actually stagnate things or how we can continue to let things proliferate, right? So we can see here that the United States, Spain, the UK, France, Iran, and Italy in this case, all in very similar scenarios. Some a few days ahead of one another in the sense of the kind of compounding growth here and the current status of when this really started to become an issue for each individual country. But we can see, interestingly enough, a diversion here in this case, right? We can see here a separation between countries like the UK, the US, France, Spain, Iran, and Italy versus South Korea, versus Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. And there's a very differing level of response that these four countries took in order to flatten the logarithmic curve that, bear in mind, this chart we're looking at is in logarithmic terms. So it's a factor of 10 for every one of these different breaks on the chart. But you can see here that there seems to be no stop here for these countries, such as the US and Spain and Italy. And the reason why is because for a long period of time, right, we postponed response. We postponed proper testing, we postponed proper social distancing, and likely postponed a decent degree of some form of quarantine or remote work. Plain and simple, guys. Those are the big differences. There's not much else you can herd immunity. And again, we can do that, but it's going to lead to a lot of people getting sick. And what's worrying to me personally is that we've seen a lot of people who aren't elderly getting caught up and actually getting sick. A lot of people who are immunocompromised who are actually getting affected by this and having long-term ramifications from it. That's the concerning thing. So I don't think that this is going to be a working solution here in this case to just simply push for herd immunity. Whereas, for example, in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan, you guys can look at videos right now. People are going about their daily lives. They're not having to mass quarantine now because they actually were able to get down to the science of who's actually affected right now and who needs to be quarantined. Plain and simple. And the growth in these different viruses, for the virus cases in these countries, are not that bad. Japan is lower than 1,000 in this case, and it's been around much earlier. It's been a problem for Japan and a lot of other parts of Asia especially seeing as you think about it geographically, right? Japan and South Korea were probably going to be the first ones hit in this case, geographically speaking. And they've been able to keep their cases relatively flat here over the last couple of weeks. They've been able to control it through proper testing. So very, very important chart here. Now, talking about some outliers in the sense of the economy, Steve Mnuchin is coming out and saying that without clear response here, that we could result in over 20% unemployment in just a couple of months here if the coronavirus is not dealt with properly, and also if we don't have proper physical stimulus in order to keep things going. And this is leading towards a really interesting revelation here, guys. We can see schools across the country right now. Over 33 different states in the U.S. have had official closures. And along with that, in the country of Canada as well, it's been the same case. We've been seeing mass amounts of school closures, some cutting down school for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and some closing out the entire school year up until June, until the summer. So we're talking about months and months where kids are not going to likely be going to school in some districts due to the fears of COVID-19. And honestly, we really could do this in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, but not everyone's getting on the same page. So you might have to extend it for multiple months, because if one area quarantines and one other doesn't, and right, you have one person, for example, maybe one adult in their family who accidentally transmits the virus to their kid or something, right? Again, it could be touch, whatever it may be. In that case, and then that kid goes to school, it starts spreading like wildfire. That's why it's important more than anything to cut down the schools, because kids don't sanitize. They don't understand about sanitization for the most part, and they don't understand about the virality of this. So in this case, it's important to understand that we need to shut down the schools first and foremost. The schools will also act as leverage for people to stay home and stay away from work when it's not necessary, to watch their kids. And I think this is, again, going to be the first domino that really gets people on the same page here. The sooner the better in this case. Outside of that as well, this is a really interesting chart that Alex Saunders as well as Brad Lowry from Blockchain Brad had shared on Twitter, showing the different growth rates here, showcasing in the case with Italy, Iran, and Spain, where we had every 2 days it would be doubling. This is the current confirmed cases right now, a little bit under 1,000 here, currently 452. We can see here in the UK and France getting a doubling every 3 days. So these are just projection models, but it showcases, and bear in mind, we're looking at a logarithmic chart here, guys. This is very, very stark growth here, doubling every day, every 3 days. I mean, this is the kind of virality of corona that makes it different from the flu. And this is why it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue as time progresses if we don't address it. And the one thing I want to make clear very, very clearly, there's been some misconceptions as well. Some people have been saying as well that, during the summer, COVID-19 can't survive in this case, and therefore the virus is going to stop. And that's not true, guys, because there are global seasons in different geographical regions, right? If you're on the different parts of the equator in this case, then you're going to have different seasons, right? So whereas it might slow down in certain regions due to increased heat, right, there are other parts of the world that are seeing increased temperatures as well and entering their summer portion of the year. And that's where the virus is going to proliferate. Again, very, very important to take into mind here that it can continue to go. And we see back during the bird flu, back in the early 1900s, we see a 3-wave cycle where there's actually 3 waves of the bird flu in this case. So again, it comes in cycles, and the sooner we address this, the sooner we can avoid the potential for that cycle to be bad in the sense of the next 2 or 3 ones that we're going to have. We might be able to fully prevent it if we can do proper testing, proper quarantining, and the moment we see cases, take dramatic measures so we don't have the kind of economic burden and also the total death burden that's going to come out of this if it isn't addressed properly. Now, the biggest policy we've got to talk about, guys, I mean, it's been one thing to see a talk about, the bailouts for corporations and the bailouts for probably likely for commercial banks through quantitative easing to some degree. But then there's also talks of a bailout for the people. And I'm really interested in seeing this. I got to say, guys, I'm actually quite pleased about this because it's looking like there's going to be $1,000 checks shipped out to every single American. And this is basically, at the end of the day, a dramatic form of UBI in this case. It is a universal basic income for the next couple of months to make sure you can get by no matter if you're still maintaining your job or if you're possibly getting laid off, as there have been mass layoffs, not only in my area, I've been hearing about on the local news, massive layoffs, but layoffs across the country in service industries and a lot of other industries that are running on razor-thin margins and have had to completely shut down their store. So in this case, again, this experiment of $1,000 check for every American, probably over the age of 18, and probably having an increased amount if you have kids, I think is a really interesting policy to test out now. I don't think there's anything really wrong with it in this case. As much as I know, yes, it's printing money in this case, and yes, it's debasing the value of overall currency. Right now, this is going to be a net benefit for everyday people if you really think about it. Because if a millionaire or billionaire in this case is getting $1,000, it doesn't really mean much for them. But for the average American, that means a lot. So this debasement of the currency is actually going to be a net benefit in this case for everyday Americans in this case. So important thing to take into mind here. But this is going to be able to provide some relief here in the short term. And they're also going to be furloughing basically federal tax payments up for over 90 days in this case. It's a very, very interesting case as well. Now, wanted to talk a little bit about why the markets have been reacting the way they have. And it has a lot to do with corporate debt, guys. Now, we know the credit rating agencies have been known to bluff things a little bit over the past. But I have to say, for the most part, at least these numbers look a little bit more accurate than the quality of the mortgages that were tossed into the CDOs that people ended up going bust on back in 2008. Because we can see, quite frankly, the biggest category of debt here is triple B in this case, right? So we're talking about junk bonds in this case that basically make up the majority of the corporate debt sector, right? So this has been building up here, and if you can't see here, guys, since back here in 2008, we've actually tripled the corporate debt. We've nearly tripled it. We're a little bit above $8 trillion, getting very close to $9 trillion for a full 3x on corporate debt over the last decade, the last 12 years. So this is very important to take into mind because this is going to come to roost here for a lot of companies who are cash deprived right now, where corporate earnings are declining like crazy, where they're not getting the kind of money now that they need for stock buybacks. So equity prices sell off. They're having a difficulty meeting their debt obligations, which puts a lot of these companies on the brink of insolvency and need of bailouts or government support. Again, dominoes starting to come into effect here. You can have repo market operations. You can toss some money at some companies. You can give every American $1,000 for the next month. The next few months, you might give $1,000 every month, and you might even, supplement some specific bailouts to these hurt industries. But the problem underneath the surface has been building up for so long, and it's just finally all coming to roost. The dominoes are falling over here. So it's important to understand the ramifications and why, even after all these different talks of stimulus, why the small cap index is down nearly 6%. And for you guys who are donating, I'm going to answer your questions. I appreciate you guys donating, supporting the channel. I just want to get through these numbers here real quick. So we can see here as well, unemployment down below 4% here for a couple of months now. Actually, really, back over the last 2 years, we've really been tailoring around 3 to 3.5% unemployment. And now we're finally at a point here where we're going to start seeing a spike in the numbers. And this is the thing that really gets me a bit upset, guys. It's kind of got me a little bit bummed out because I know when unemployment spikes, it not only means that people's lives are more difficult, but I know that this is going to lead to some very serious ramifications across not only the United States, but also countries across the world. It's going to make life more difficult. There are people who die when unemployment goes up. People can't cover medical expenditures. People are just in a worse off state, and it's really upsetting, right? Again, economies move through cycles. This is the way of the world in many ways, but a lot of this is due to the fact that we've been building up another problem, and we never really got towards addressing the real core problems after the previous recession. And I would say that these numbers are really not below 3% in the real world. They're probably something more like anywhere from 7 to 10%, and that number is going to get higher and higher here over the next couple of weeks. Along with that as well, jobless claims, right? The sad reality is that when unemployment claims are low and when unemployment is low, it tends to be that it's a sign that a recession is around the corner. We're finally getting it now. So last thing I wanted to talk about here, really interesting index here from LMTR. LMTR here showcasing an index that they create. I don't know if it was them that specifically created it, but it basically is an aggregate indicator of fear in markets, so the major risk indicator. So showcasing here, we can see here on the chart here, showcasing when we got these flashing signs here, usually on the cusp of some kind of pullback or recession here. And it showcases that we set the highest record ever on the panic button here for the index. So This is an aggregate of a lot of different things. It's looking at spreads between treasuries, spreads between bank rates, all kinds of different things outside of just simply taking a look at the VIX, which is important as well. And we've been seeing this, guys. Even if you're just looking at the stock sell-off itself, this has been the most dramatic sell-off in equities in the sense of severity over a period of time in history. All right, we've seen greater sell-offs before, but they take a much longer, prolonged period of time. And over the last 2 months, this has been the most stark decline across the indices for the United States, from the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq, that we've ever seen in this period of time. Worse than 1929. And it shows the absolute sheer volume of panic that's coming due to COVID-19, because this has been a black swan event, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades, plain and simple. And we obviously had it during a time where markets were overvalued. So anyways, that's it in the sense of the kind of major things I want to talk about, guys. Keeping in mind here that markets are near peak fear in this case. Apologize, guys. I don't think I've had enough water yet. But that's it in the sense of the data we're going to be looking at. My summary here, I'm still pressing for the same stuff, guys. I'm not the leader of the world, but we need to have mass quarantine in this case. We need to address this sooner rather than later. I like seeing the steps that are happening here in the US. We're finally getting on board with, I think, the kind of narrative that we've seen in Asia. Testing is increasing, so we have a much better idea of where the virus is spreading and how severe it is. And along with that as well, we're getting people staying inside. A lot of people are working remote. Schools are shutting down. That is going to be a hotbed for spreading the virus. If we don't deal with that now, it is going to mean lives lost, and that's the thing that really scares me. So at the end of the day, it seems like we're taking steps and necessary precautions. All right, so I want to go ahead here. We've got a lot of questions in the chat. I do want to answer the donations here. We did have some people supporting the chat, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much to GPU Professor Wally, $10 donation. Thank you very much. So glad to catch you live. Always love your calm yet robust coverage on crypto. Learn, earn, don't get burned. GPU, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes, it's a matter of approaching these kind of crazy scenarios in a very moderate way, trying to dive through the data, understanding the ramifications for not only everyday people, but for markets as well, and just trying to get a better idea of what's going on here. Alrighty, so we have as well State Function DMB, 5-year donation. Thank you very much, my friend. Love your in-depth videos and live streams, man. Great work. That's why I canceled my cable 2 years ago. Can't get quality content like this from cable. Oh, thank you, man. That's a pretty big compliment in that case and stuff. But it's true. I think honestly, the internet has just provided such an abundance of content. I can't even think. I sometimes will watch TV if I'm spending time, maybe for example, if I'm going to spend time with family or something like that, or maybe there's one or two like TV shows or movies that I like watching from time to time, but it's on Netflix. It's like on the web where you can just get it at any time. I'm just so burnt out on TV and cable. So I appreciate the kind comment. Some Cody said, will this be the worst financial crisis the world has ever seen? So I don't know in the sense of severity of in the sense of the full-scale recession or sell-off. It really depends on how we react and respond to this. I think in the current pace we're at, this will be something that leads us towards anywhere from a 35 to 50% pullback in equities, which wouldn't be the worst. But in the sense of the severity of the sell-off that we've had so far, yes, it has been the worst. And I think it's just been due to a sheer fact of global panic right now. All right. Let's see here. Bill Ackman asked the U.S. president, asked Trump to shut down the country for the next 30 days. Yeah, I mean, I think what you need to do, as I've talked about, guys, is my kind of dream scenario would be one where people came together all at once, the United States and a variety of other countries, and we employed all of the best public-private partnerships that we could ever impact. Let me put this right. Through a mixture of public-private partnerships, global cooperation to do a global quarantine, we could deal with this in less than a month, plain and simple. And the way that it would work is that you employ all the fiscal policies we're doing right now of like $1,000 for every adult American. And what you do is, now that you have cash in the hands of everyday people, they can cover basic expenditures, food, necessities, home maintenance, things like that they would need during that short-term period of time, medicine, supplies. Basically, you have the physical stimulus in this case. People are good then. It doesn't matter if they really are working right now or not. And then the next thing you do is you work with a variety of great US companies. You work with companies like Amazon that can do delivery. And basically, en masse, you make sure to segment workers into two categories: non-essential and essential. Essential workers in this case are people who need to fulfill the services that all the Americans need who are staying home. All of the basic things: medical procedures, food delivery, supply delivery, people who are working at power or water utility plants, all kinds of things that are necessary to run even in a small or kind of slow economy where people are staying home, to provide the basic essentials. Outside of that, you would have everyone else staying home, either working remote or just simply taking time off, right? And it's not really unfair in the sense of the subsidy of $1,000, because you might still be receiving your income if you're working from home, or in this case, everyone's receiving that baseline $1,000. So again, it's across the board for everyone, similar to the concept of a UBI, or probably what would be seen as Andrew Yang's freedom dividend, right? So I think that that's a perfect thing to test out right now. It would be a perfect thing to make sure we have a public-private partnership of Amazon and all these different companies, food delivery services like Uber Eats and DoorDash, and support local businesses, as well as supporting, again, the average consumer in this case by getting them the things that they need, right? Now, again, I bet there's some things I'm not thinking about here. There's probably some areas where we need to fulfill some small problems with that concept. But I think that's what we should do right now. And if we get done with it in the next few weeks to this month, we could avert a national crisis that could lead to millions of deaths. It would be a huge, resounding success if we actually went through this properly and we tested employees who were leaving from the facility and packaging goods and services. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent, guys. So if you guys agree with me, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, let me know. Let's see here. Germania said fascism, then socialism, then a collapse. No, thank you. Well, Germania, see, this is the thing, guys. I think I'm a libertarian as much as the next guy in a lot of ways, right? I mean, that's why I'm in crypto for a lot of reasons. I don't think this is draconian. To have everyone get on the same page and say, hey, look, there is a biological threat that could literally lead to a ton of our elderly population, and even some of our young, as we're seeing, getting sick and not only possibly dying, but even if they survive, having long-term damage to their lungs and different long-term ramifications. If we don't deal with this soon enough, if we don't get on the same page and think for others rather than ourselves, this is going to be a serious issue. This is not the common flu. That's the key thing to keep in mind here. And I think this is a point in time where, even as a libertarian, I believe in that idea of limited government stepping in time of national crisis and setting policies to where we all work in the betterment of everyone else, right? This is not something we can be skeptical on or play conspiracy theories on, guys. This is something that's real. Just look at Italy. Italy is a prime example of responding too late and too many people dying. And the sad thing is if they didn't respond with the quarantine that they're doing right now, it would have been worse. So I guess in a sense that's good news that they've responded soon enough. But anyways, guys, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be too opinionated on this, but this is something where we need to put facts first, and we need to have a serious addressment of it first. Let's see. Lai Gordon said, don't keep money on exchanges. They're basically banks. That's true. And it's funny enough, guys, we talk about fractional reserve banking. We talk about all these things that are terrible about the banking sector. What do you think Binance, Coinbase, all those other exchanges are doing? Right? I'm not saying they're bad platforms, but I'm not going to make any full accusations, but I have no doubt that there are a good plethora of cryptocurrency exchanges who are running off fractional reserves. Slim, thank you very much for the other donation. What's your view on the halving of the current situation? Slim, I talked about it the other day in the previous video. My general thesis is that we're going to have a pretty long delayed response to the halving, because when we're talking about the supply shock that's going to come from it, I think the general summary is that it is going to come into effect, right? It is going to eventually start to factor into price, because you do have a general kind of similarity in demand, give or take, on every single day. And then you're going to have a huge supply shock. And this is going to take a little bit of while for it to reflect in price, because it doesn't happen overnight. But over time, as you start to see that general demand shift, right, where demand is still maintaining, the supply shock plays in, and the price keeps going up, demand keeps ramping up, and supply generally stays the same. And that's when you start to get these kind of parabolic run-ups. It's the reason why the halving hasn't been priced in the last two cycles. It can't be priced in until it's gone into effect and you give it a couple of days, weeks, or months to start weighing in on the overall supply and demand side economics of Bitcoin. So hopefully that explains it. I think it's just going to be a delayed response. As I've talked about, taking a look at the long-term chart here, right? We can take a look at I think it's on my Coinbase chart by chance. No, I think I've got it on Bitstamp. I gotta switch over to my TA real quick. There we go. Let's see here real quick. Go ahead and put it here on the weekly. No, is it not on? Oh, this is Binance. I'm sorry, it switched me to Binance. Let me go ahead here. There we go, Bitstamp. So this is the general chart I think we're going to keep, going through here. It's the standard chart. It's not logarithmic, and basically we'll eventually probably get a breakout towards the end. That's the hope there, is that after the halving of it, it could apply pressure here that could really spark the next rally and get past this line of resistance. So hopefully that makes some sense there. I think that it's going to be a much longer term sideways push and before we really start getting the cycle in later 2020, 2021. So Zane asked, what do you think about oil and its price? Zane, honestly, there's a lot of things, guys, that I always try to be very open about, like my flaws and where I made missed calls. One of the things we were like ultra confident on was the price of oil dropping down. We've basically had this in my newsletter. I'll go ahead and show you guys the drawing here. Just zoom out real quick. We've been having this stuff written. You can see the arrow is pointing back here to December, but I've been talking about a bear market for oil for well over a year and a half, as we were testing up towards this line of resistance back here in October, November 2018. Right? And now we're finally getting into this part where we're going to be coming down here, right? Prices are down here already at $25 a barrel. I didn't even see this morning. It's dropped even more. Last time I checked, it was at 29. So you can see here, barrel of oil here, down here, $25. U.S. producers on average cannot produce at anything lower than $40, or that basically means if they are producing it, they're producing it at a loss, and they're already racking up massive debt to support the operations that they're doing. So you have a lot of that corporate debt in that case made up in the energy sector, and it's going to mean a lot of U.S. companies going bust. It's going to mean an entire U.S. energy sector going silent and dead for the next couple of months, and it's going to mean massive layoffs. That's the saddest part in all this, guys. I don't really care if an oil company goes bankrupt. I care the fact that there's going to be a lot of Americans losing their jobs. And I would say in this time, right, where there's such a glutton supply in the United States, where we're a net energy exporter, in order to make sure that we don't have to deal with the second issue, which is an oil price war, I would just say buy domestic. Make it mandatory for the next 4 or 6 months that we buy domestic production, right? And that would probably bring the price up back to a higher rate, right? Again, not a very libertarian response, but I think during times like this, it might be good to have a little bit of a protectionist policy to make sure that we don't have a ton of oil bankruptcies during a time when people are already worried about losing their job across other industries, and we're already looking at 20% unemployment because of the COVID-19, right? Might be decent to do something like that. But anyways, again, yeah, just take a look at the chart here, guys. Not good. Setting a new significant low here that we haven't seen since all the way back in 2003 per barrel of oil. Unbelievable. And it's going to go down all the way to 20, guys. It's likely going to go down to 20 because Russia and Saudi Arabia are at an oil war right now. They're at a price war. And OPEC as well isn't cutting. It's going to keep going down and down until there's final announcements of cuts, plain and simple. Now, in the sense of some larger producers, like, there's like ones like Conoco, for example, ConocoPhillips. Some of these stocks are at 2008 recession levels, right? Down from $79 down to 26. You can take a look at XLE, which is a broad energy ETF, down here to levels we haven't seen since 2004. I mean, this is huge, guys. Just in the last 3 months, cutting more than 50% down here in valuations for the entire energy sector. Massive ramifications. It's very upsetting. I don't like seeing this, guys. This is going to be spelling bad news for the actual real world economy. It's speaking to the fact that energy producers are going to be freezed in the United States. They're going to have to cut back operations that took 2 years to plan. Oil production is not something simple. It's something that's planned out over a multitude of months, if not multiple years. And when you make those cuts, it's bad for the economy. And eventually what it leads to is less energy independence in the United States. So, all right, let's see here. see here, guys. To your last point, yeah, that was my point earlier. It doesn't matter what season it is, guys. It's gonna keep spreading in this case because there are global seasons in different regions of the world, right? So whereas in one region of the world it's gonna be winter, it's gonna be summertime, right? So the virus is global, guys. That's the really big issue here. And so long as it's a problem in other regions of the world, it can come back very quickly depending on the change in temperature. Rocky G asks, Nick, how long do you think this downturn could last in the economy? Missed the start. Rocky, it's if we don't address this promptly with financial support and then also actual government policy to get people to quarantine and stop the spread and basically flatten out in the next month, this is going to be an official recession, the likes of which we've commonly seen before. Basically where, you know, it can last up to 2 years in this case. So that's what I would think is going to happen. It's going to be about 1.5 to 2 years if we don't deal with this promptly. So if we deal with this pretty quickly, this can all just be a bad dream, and markets can rebound. People don't have to die, and people can go back to work just like they were, and it's going to feel like we were in the twilight zone for a couple of weeks. I would rather have that. I would very much rather have that. Upgrade brings up a good point. I'm looking forward to a simpler life. Me too, man. It's this is not the world I like to live in. It's I'll be honest, guys. I know we're talking about it and stuff, but I will say it does get tiring a bit. I don't like worrying about this stuff. Bitcoin Stash asked me if I was libertarian. Yeah, I'm mostly libertarian for the most part. If you've been watching Ron Paul's videos, he called the virus a hoax. I'd be interested to get Ron Paul's take on it, but I don't think it's a hoax, guys. I mean, the numbers don't lie on this. The virality is very severe. And the only reason why it's not a big issue in Asia is because China, South Korea, Japan, all these nations, Singapore, they took dramatic, in the case of China, draconian measures, which I don't agree with. I don't think you should weld people's doors shut or drag people out of their homes. But in the case of South Korea and Singapore and Japan, you can see that there's a much different level of response. And now they get to go about living their day-to-day lives, not worrying about a viral spread of COVID-19. In the United States, in the UK, the EU, and South America, we can't say the same. And in Canada as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention Canada. We can't say the same. Right now, we are in a very different status. And if we don't make moves over the next 2 weeks, this is going to be an issue that's probably out of our control. And it's going to cost us a hell of a lot more than it's already costing us. So, anyways. Reg S said, you got to admit these prices are low. Yeah, Reg, I'll be honest. I hate to look at it this time and stuff. I will say there's probably some stocks that are at a decent price range now. We're back down here to where we were back in December 2018. But at the same time and stuff, markets are opening up down another 4 or 5% across most indices, and it might look like we're setting in for another sell-off here. I think we're going to go well beyond the support range here. I don't think we're going to hold out here. Thor asked, how long until the Fed goes to negative interest rates? I would say, honestly, that's a question I don't feel comfortable answering, Thor. I would say if we don't respond in the next 2 weeks again promptly, Treasury yields are going to go lower because the Fed's going to have to cut rates to negative. I think, actually, I'll be honest. I'll take that back, Thor. I would say that it's likely going to be when the Fed prints enough money and it's not working. And then they get down to using their only tool, which is lowering interest rates. And they're going to lower it to negative territory. Street said, what are you talking about? Asia isn't going about their daily lives. Lol, I'm here. It's like an apocalypse. Street, I'd be interested to know what area of Asia that you're living in. If you're in like Singapore or South Korea, I've seen videos in this case of people just going about their daily lives now in a lot of cases. A lot of people, I think it was in Singapore I'd saw the video. But I might be wrong. It depends on the area that you're living in, right? Different countries are in different statuses right now. If you're in Thailand, you're in the Philippines, or if you're, for example, I'm trying to think of the other I'm trying to name the different country stuff. Yeah. Basically, depending on where you are and stuff, it might be very different. But I saw plenty of videos now where people are actually not having to quarantine much anymore because they've been able to contain the virus. Yeah, Thor brought up a good point. Sweden is now negative 50%, or sorry, excuse me, negative 0.5%. So half a percentage point. Thor said, negative interest rates, I'm all in. Yep. It would be pretty nice if you could get paid to take out a mortgage. Okay, I'm in. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm real curious why the UK is taking the position of just pushing for herd immunity. That's the World Health Organization, or WHO in this case, is basically recommended against that. So, oh, it's the streets. That makes sense. If you're in Thailand or Malaysia, yes, yeah, Malaysia is in like complete lockdown, or at least some portions of Malaysia from some of the people I know who live there. Yeah, no, if you're in Thailand or Malaysia, yes, very different story. Yes, and I'm real curious to get your take and stuff yourself, from that region and stuff, what it's like right now, because I know most areas are considering lockdown or shutting down schools or doing things that sort. But um, yeah, Tiago, it does seem like the UK has been very lag behind. I think it's been a sense of complacency. And I'll be honest, guys, the thing that's really ironic at the end of the day, you'd think like, oh, they're doing this for some reason and stuff. No, it's just literally the leadership probably has no consensus on how severe this really is. It kind of takes social pressure in a sense to get people to realize, oh, okay, wow, this isn't the flu, right? This isn't just I can't just let my personal opinion overwhelm here, in this case my decision making process. As a leader, I need to realize, okay, maybe I didn't really understand the severity of this, right? That's what a lot of people are going through right now. A lot of people wrote this off as something not to be concerned about, because the problem is that many people in this world don't have the ability. At the end of the day, guys, it's a very true thing. Most people do not have the foresight to see 2 weeks out, and they don't understand the concept of daily, 2-day or 3-day compounding or logarithmic growth in this case, right? Exponential growth. Now, there's no exponential growth in the real world. There's eventually going to be an S curve. You're basically going to top out. But this is basically, again, something that does happen to a degree here. We have an increased growth factor, and then eventually we have an inflection point and start to top out. That's how all pandemics work. So in this case, hopefully we can deal with it sooner rather than later. That's the ultimate goal. We want to make sure that S curve is as small as possible. So anyways, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video today. I'll probably take one more question here, and then we're going to hop off. Let's see here. So I basically saw a comment here saying I needed to get my facts straight. Hold on, I lost the message. So Boro said, you need to get your facts straight, Nicholas. The UK isn't complacent. They're slowing the curve so there isn't a spike to overwhelm the National Health Service. Or maybe National Healthcare System. I don't know exactly what the acronym is referring to. But I would say the UK isn't really flattening the curve yet. Right now, again, from the current data, we'll have to see if the UK's policy is as effective as North Korea, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, mainland China. Right now, it's growing along at the same rate that we're seeing with the US and France. But again, this is just current data. You might be right. I really don't think that herd immunity is going to work because in that case, you need to increase the number of cases in order to suppress the supposed continued growth. I think the logic is a little bit flawed, because what's sad to me and why I think it's so high risk is that I'll try to put it in a good way. All right, we say that for young people it's not deadly. First off, we don't know that to be sure, but let's just go ahead with the assumption, that all the cases in Italy where young people have been dealing with respiratory issues from the coronavirus and stuff, let's just say that that's not even relevant. It doesn't exist. if you get a ton of young people sick, I have no doubt that for the 14-day incubation period, there is going to be a moment in time where they make contact with elderly people. So during this window of time where you're pushing for herd immunity, you're going to expose a lot of elderly people, and you're basically stating that you're okay with the fact of realizing that there are going to be a lot of people who are either immunocompromised, again, not just elderly people, immunocompromised individuals or elderly people who are going to die from this. And we're just going to accept that. And we're not going to take the economic cost and the time and patience cost that plays into role in all this of quarantining and dealing with this right now. We're just going to let it proliferate, right? So you've not only got a lot of deaths that are guaranteed in this method, but along with that as well, you want to talk about the economic impact. There's 2 weeks we could just go of not doing anything or keeping it to non-essential labor staying home, and we could get over with it very quickly and, quarantine things, deal with it, do proper testing, catch up, and make sure we can have it under control. Or we can have multiple months of people getting sick, having to be laid off from work, disrupting the economy, disrupting consumer spending, having a weak consumer over 12 months, right? As this virus, I guess not 12 months, I would say up until the end of the year or over the next, actually it could extend for a little while further. But again, for multiple months, having a weakish consumer continuing to drag down the economy rather than 2 weeks where we're doing nothing and then coming back into doing things just as normal. That's the difference between this kind of herd immunity issue where we're going to just kind of kick the can down the road versus something where we're going to be able to simply deal with this in a very stark manner in a short period of time all together, and then prevent a lot of deaths, prevent a lot of economic slowdown, provide the stimulus so that we can jolt the economy back into position, right back where we were beforehand, and avert a national, or actually an international pandemic in this case. That's my view on it, man. I might be, again, missing something. I might be missing the UK's position on herd immunity, but that's what I'm getting from it. And there's a lot of flaws in that thinking where, again, it's just like fiscal policy. It's just kicking the can down the road, right? Rather than dealing with this early on. All right, guys. Let's see here. We got a lot of questions. Slim, I'm happy to be here for you guys. Thank you. I hope you guys are enjoying the conversation. Street Shade said Philippines overreact to everything, probably for good reason. They're dense and healthcare is all bad. Won't even give out penicillin when you have an infection. Wow. Let's see here. Thank you for the donation, Slim. I appreciate it. Oh, FMAX, well, you brought up a point here about, like, it doesn't choose on age. If there's a young boy who gets it has a low immune system, the virus will attack. Yes, that's why there's two terms I used. Immunocompromised, and then the other one is likely elderly. You can see very clearly that the age brackets make older elderly people, in this case, susceptible if you look at the death rate per age bracket. All right, guys, I think that's going to be it for today's video. I appreciate you all joining me here for this great conversation. And more than anything, guys, do your part. That's the best thing we can do right now. I mean, the only effect that I have here as a YouTuber is for those of you who are listening to me here, the few hundred of you listening live and the thousands who are going to be listening afterwards. Stay inside if you can. Help out where you can as well. If you need to go outside, make sure it's to help someone else who's less fortunate, an elderly individual, and make sure that you're not sick yourself. Make sure to wash your hands. Make sure to keep social distancing, even from your family or your friends during this period of time. And make sure to cut down any non-essential travel outside of your home if you can. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the video. I love you guys. I hope you all are doing well wherever you are. And I hope you're making it through this crazy time in the sense of markets and the global pandemic we're going through right now. I'll be here for you guys throughout the rest of the week. We're going to be doing a live stream tomorrow, and then we'll do a normal video on Friday. That being said, everyone, thank you all so much for watching, and have a great rest of the day wherever you are. Take care, everyone.